I need to use it. I am John Fisher. I'm on the Citizens Research Group. Many of you may not know me. I'm probably the least public face. I don't own a business here. I just live and work here. My wife Patricia and I live out in the township. We're not in the village. And one of the things that drove me to want to participate in this is, as Billy mentioned my line, the governance of this island seems to be the tail wagging the dog. It's been mentioned that the majority of the residents of South Bass Island actually live in the township, but, and I'm gonna make a number up, don't hold me to this, 90%, 92% of the economic activity of the island takes place within the village. I'm sure it's a big number, something up there. So having a voice in the governing of the portion of the island that drives so much of the economic activity, and the economic activity is what drives the quality of life. Golf carts, noise, VRBOs, Airbnbs, all of those things. The township has a less ability to regulate those than the village, because the village has home rule, forget the word. The village has home rule. They can enact ordinances, they can be enforced by police, by the sheriff. They are just better able to control what happens within their jurisdiction. My designated portion of this presentation was to address the letter from the township trustees that came out after they learned that this group had been put together. And there's a copy of their letter in the packet you all have, also with our rebuttal in red. I don't know if anyone's taken the time to read that yet. I'm certainly not going to read it all to you, but I am going to tell you kind of the basis for each and every one of our rebuttals. As Laura mentioned, Bowling Green State University has now analyzed this question 3 times. The first 2 times they were able to make recommendations. And those recommendations were that the entirety of South Bass Island be annexed into the village. And I think the trustees, remembering that those were the first 2 recommendations, were probably concerned that that's the way this group is going. However, as Billy stressed, we came into this with no preconceived notion. That wasn't our goal. It wasn't our agenda to make all of South Bass Island the village. We wanted local government consultants to help us come to the conclusion of what is the best way to go. Also, something that's interesting that Pete didn't mention, South Bass Island is unique, I think, within the state of Ohio, and maybe later Pete can correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but on South Bass Island, the village and the township overlap. They coexist. Usually, when a larger municipality or a village annexes township property, they then exclude the township from the village. They change the boundaries and shrink the footprint of the township. That's not how Put-in-Bay has ever operated. Every parcel in the village of Put-in-Bay is also part of the township. They pay taxes to both. Dave Schaefer, I know, a member of our committee, he owns a business here, Ashley's Island House. And he's brought up a couple of times, I pay taxes to both. I pay to the village, I pay to the township. That's a little bit unique, and I'm not sure if we're the only one that's set up like that, but it is unique. We're one of the few if there are others. So the recommendation of local government consultants that this slow roll approach, parcel by parcel or groups of parcels, 2 or 3 neighbors or 8 or 10 neighbors can band together and say, we would like to be annexed into the village, and go through the steps to have that accomplished. And I just lost my train of thought, excuse me.
Call it a senior moment.
It is a senior moment, yes. I'm in the right place, I'm in the senior center. By banding together and making the slow roll, they will not be excluded from the township. So the township won't lose most of the taxes. There is one or two, I forget which, the Park
Police
District.
levy and Park District.
The police levy and the Park District are not paid by people in the village, but all the other village,
some of the Park District is paid by the village, but they're different levies.
okay. Not a lot. There's not a lot of difference. People who live in the village pay essentially the same taxes as those in the township, as Pete made note of. So the cost isn't that big an issue. The biggest issue to me is the tail wagging the dog. There are, in this November, as I understand it, there are going to be 4 council seats up for election. I don't know, people haven't declared, at least not to my knowledge, who's going to, currently in those offices, who's going to run to hold those seats, if there are going to be any challengers. But there are fewer and fewer people every year, every election cycle, that seem willing to step up and help run the village. If we expand the footprint of the village while not shrinking the footprint of the township, revenues for both governments essentially stay the same, but the pool of eligible voters or eligible residents eligible to run for those offices expands. And that's really, I think, the most important part of this. So back to the trustees' letter, every point they made was based on the premise that expansion of the village would mean shrinkage of the township. And that just isn't true. And I get it. The trustees are worried about, we don't want to lose our revenue. South Bass Island is the economic driver of all the Bass Islands, I venture to say. And the township still has to provide services to Middle Bass, North Bass, Sugar, Rattlesnake, all those others. So this would be essentially revenue neutral to the township and the village. So financially, there shouldn't be an issue. There shouldn't be an issue to the people whose properties get annexed, as Pete explained. The tax implications are minimal. There is a cost of annexing, and that's something that people are going to have to be willing to step up and bear the burden of. There are going to be legal fees. You have to have your property surveyed by an engineer so that the county can determine exactly what it is that's being annexed into the village. We don't know exactly what that's going to cost yet. Kim Morrison is already working on annexing her own property and several of her neighbors. She's in consultation with a couple of different attorneys, trying to get the best deal she can, trying to get the price down. The more people that annex in a single group, the cheaper it should be for everybody. But there is going to be a cost, and that we need to be transparent about up front. The benefit, however, of spending that money, and it might be a few $1,000s, $4,000 or $5,000 getting annexed in, the benefit is you get to run for village council. If you don't want to run for village council, you get to vote for who's on village council. And who's on village council matters to all of us. Because like I said, the village is the tail that wags the dog. So the trustees' letter, I'm sure it was well-intentioned, and it was based on review of the previous 2 Bowling Green studies that recommended, I'm not sure if it encompassed, if the intent the first 2 times was to dissolve the township on South Bass Island or not, but regardless, that isn't what's being recommended now. Every single one of the trustees' objections can be boiled down to their fear that they would cease to exist, at least on South Bass Island. So that's pretty much what I wanted. Well, one other point, Sarah Booker here is an example. She owns, along with her family, businesses in the village, but she lives in the township. She has no voice in ordinances that are passed and how her business can operate. Billy Market operates a business not in the village, so never mind, I'm not gonna use village.
Different parks and boats in there.
Only parks is boats. Well, that's right, I guess they do have operations, but the vast majority of residents don't have any input in how the important part of the island is governed, and that's what we're trying to help resolve. And I don't know if we're quite to the Q&A, but there was one gentleman.
Just a question, I mean, the few people that have the ability to run for office or to even vote, this has to be your primary residence, is that correct? I mean, we have no voting rights, now it's.
You have to be registered to vote
I'm a
here.
person, yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna give a legal opinion. You have to be registered to vote here, I think, to run for
Your
office
primary
here.
mailing address.
And your primary mailing address, okay. One other thing I forgot to mention, within the packet of information everyone got are some cutouts of maps of the island. The yellow line marks the boundaries of the village. As Pete mentioned, to be annexed into the village, your property has to be contiguous to, touch some part of the village. So the people who are in the first circle of properties that touch the village, they have to get the ball rolling. And then it's like a domino effect. If somebody is contiguous to the village, but their neighbor behind them really wants to run for council and can't because they don't have, they can't be annexed in, if they can talk to their neighbor and say, you know what, if you'd annex, then I'd annex, and then I could run. I could be the next mayor, I could be the next council person. So think about this, not only for your own behalf, but for the benefit of the island and your neighbors who might be interested in taking the next step and helping govern our island. Sarah?
I feel this is important. A couple meetings ago, I posed the question. I said, what happens in the village when nobody wants to run for council, for village council, and nobody wants to be the mayor? Then where are we? And so Laura did look into that because it is a concern as the village population declines and property is bought by businesses for housing. So this is an important question that Laura will answer because we're not to that point, but we may be.
Yeah, so I'm not an attorney, but I did look at the ORC, and Pete, you might know the answer to this better, but what I was able to determine is that the village council has 30 days to find someone if no one is running for that seat. And then after that, the mayor has 30 days to find someone. And then after that, it was kind of vague, but it was somehow you go to the state then for help. I would assume the village attorney would have to get involved at that point after the 60 days. Are you familiar with that process, Pete?
So I do know that the council and the mayor have the opportunity to appoint people if nobody is interested in running for those positions. But Laura, quite frankly, I haven't taken it any further because, in all of the communities I've worked in and with, that's as far as it's gotten. They found people who they can appoint. If there's nobody that's willing to do it, I would have to do a little more research on that.
Sure. So are we ready to go to questions, or you're all set, John?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll go to the question answer portion. Does anyone have any?
Is there any difference in zoning between?
Let me bring you the microphone. Okay.
Is there any difference in zoning between the village and the township?
Yes, there is, and John is actually on zoning for the township, so maybe you can address that a little bit.
Well, is it done area by area? Because I believe where we're at, you can't rent for less than a month, whereas where my mother's cottage always was, you can rent by the week.
Are you in the village or the township?
Township.
Okay. I don't think there's anything in the township that is limited by the month. I think they can go as short a period as a week, anywhere in the township. township with the conditional use permit. But to answer your original question, yes, there are differences in zoning, and if you were to be annexed into the village, you would fall under the village zoning ordinances. Or resolution, I guess it's called.